Welcome to Sleight of Mouth with Robert Dilts, a man who needs no introduction, and Oksana.
We are very much looking forward to this amazing event, and we are waiting for this event for many years, because this is first time when Robert Dilts personally is going to explain about Sleight of Mouth live online, first time in the history.
Yeah, and Sleight of Mouth is really it's an amazing model. It's so attractive and it's so useful, and it's amazingly popular. I think maybe, Robert, it might be fair to say that it's kind of a prism that shows all the different colors of NLP. It's you can see everything there.
Absolutely,
and,
yes.
We are going to invite Robert on screen with us.
Let's go.
Here he is.
Oh,
Magic is starting.
Hey,
Welcome, Robert.
Just want to say how much fun it's been also to work with you both. We did a Russian language version of the Sleight of Mouth already, and so this is something that we're really a good team with, and I just want to really honor this opportunity to be working with Oksana and Richard Connor, and so welcome everybody. Welcome to this free webinar, this introduction to Sleight of Mouth. I'm sure that some of you probably already know about it. Others, it might be that you're just learning. So what I want to do is I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of what is Sleight of Mouth. We'll be reviewing some of the patterns, how we use it, why it's important. As Richard and Oksana were saying, interestingly, of all the books, which I've now written over 32 books now over the past 45 years, of all these books, Sleight of Mouth has been sort of the biggest seller. And I think that's because there is something truly magical about language. And of course, a big part of my background is in the area of neuro-linguistic programming. And the whole notion of neuro-linguistics has to do with this idea that language can change worlds. In fact, the subtitle of the volume 2, I'm just finishing up Sleight of Mouth volume 2. The subtitle is How Words Change Worlds. And in fact, I'm going to put up my PowerPoint here because I want to kind of be walking through a little bit of a storyboard about Sleight of Mouth and where it comes from and how we can use it. So let me share that here. We'll get that up also on our projection screen here. We'll wait just a moment. Anyway, the basic idea of Sleight of Mouth is, sometimes it's called the magic of language, the power of words. Also, sometimes we call it, verbal reframing or conversational belief change. And it really is all of these things. It's about how we use language to shift our perceptions, our beliefs, our understanding of the world. So truly, words can change worlds. Words have changed worlds. And more, I think we're seeing that words are significant in changing the world. So Sleight of Mouth, as you see, here's the picture from the book. It shows there's a card magician in there, so there's a mouth and there's a card magician in there. And actually, that's what the notion of Sleight of Mouth comes from, is from magic, when a magician does some sort of sleight of hand. And we can do the same thing with words. So, and of course, as we'll see, there's a series of these patterns that make up Sleight of Mouth. We'll be touching upon these. But as I was saying, so Sleight of Mouth, the word sleight in this case comes from an Old Norse word, and it means, crafty or cunning, artful, dexterous. And again, I was mentioning sleight of hand as a kind of an example of this. And these patterns that we explore in the program, and I'll be sharing some with you here, of course, today, they have this sort of similar magical quality. We can often create dramatic shifts in people's inner experience, in their perception, by using language, by using the right words. So again, we'll be looking at that. And they come from modeling that I did. I'm sure many of you know that My background is in various kinds of modeling through neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, but also through success factor modeling, SFM. And, I've always been fascinated with language and the power of language. And when I first got involved in NLP, because we do it a lot of modeling, I was looking at how some of the significant people in history use language, and what could I understand about the way they were using language. And a lot of the typical NLP, distinctions, verbal distinctions, were very interesting, but it didn't quite capture exactly what was happening. And here you see some pictures of people that, of the many that I've modeled, but these are examples of people like William Shakespeare, Milton Erickson. I'll be actually sharing some examples. Milton Erickson, I'm sure many of you have heard of him or know that he was a very important role model in the beginning of the development of neurolinguistic programming. He was a hypnotherapist and a psychiatrist, and probably even still today, probably has the greatest sort of record of effective work. That he was able to create all kinds of change and various types of healing, mental healing, physical healing, and so I think he was certainly somebody that influenced me a lot. It was a person that I was able to study with personally. Then there was people like Socrates. I did not study with personally, although the Socratic method is definitely something that's still very much part of our world today. Abraham Lincoln, who was a U.S. president that was known for his ability to, first of all, his ability to speak, but also for, bringing freedom and liberty to the African American people. Mohandas Gandhi is clearly one of the pioneers and important influences on nonviolent modes of change. And along with him, there's Martin Luther King Jr., Sigmund Freud. Of course, there's Jesus. Next, Jesus is Richard Bandler, who are interesting contrasts, but both wonderful people with very wonderful language abilities. Richard Bandler was in fact really the person that, when I was listening to him doing a work once, and actually you could just see, wow, he was just doing these amazing things with language, but I couldn't, the typical NLP descriptions didn't really, capture it. And so he's one of a very important stimulus for this. And then there's Oprah Winfrey. So we have, media, literature, philosophy, healing, psychotherapy, religion, politics, law. And all of these are places where we are influencing people through words. We are changing worlds with words. So how are sleight of mouth patterns used before we get into the details? So they are, sometimes we call them patterns of persuasion. The sleight of mouth is when we're using language to either confirm or reinforce a belief. You can also use sleight of mouth to introduce doubt, to sway opinions, to incite action, to create or challenge generalizations, and also to build or protect a particular belief or belief system. So again, there's many, many uses. Again, we say the sleight of mouth is when we use words in relationship to beliefs and belief systems. Some other applications of how sleight of mouth is used is, for example, with some of these role models we were just looking at in the Socratic method, you're unpacking belief statements and examining assumptions. In other cases, you're challenging and transforming limiting beliefs, or sometimes what we call thought viruses. I'll get into that in just a moment. You're oftentimes flipping perceptions of reality, that you think it's one way, and suddenly you're through the use of these words, you're seeing something in a completely different way. You can also use language, and it's the sleight of mouth about using language to inspire fervent motivation, to motivate people to do things that could be challenging, risky, effortful. Of course, you can use sleight of mouth to create confidence, but also to connect with something beyond individual identity. Language serves a lot of purposes, and especially the types of patterns, these language patterns we work with sleight of mouth. And as I said, the sleight of mouth is using language in a particular way. It's using language specifically at this level of belief. Now, some of you, those of you who know me and have known my work, will probably be familiar with this notion of the levels of change pyramid, which is basically saying that, our lives, our realities, in a way, are built from different levels. We have a foundational level in our environment, our physical, tangible environment. And sometimes change, of course, happens in that environment. And today, we have a lot of change going on in our environment. There are conflicts, there's climate change, there's technical change, there's many things happening. And that means we have to adapt behaviorally. We have to do things differently. So that means there needs to be a change in behavior. Changes in behavior usually come when we have a change in our way of thinking. And here we talk about capabilities. I need to develop new competencies. This whole Zoom work right now, a lot of this happened for many of us because of the pandemic. So we had to develop new competences, new capabilities to do things. But then there's also change at the level of values and beliefs. And we say these are the changes at the level of why. So we could say our environment is where and when we do something. Our behavior is what we do in there. Our capabilities and competences are how we do it. Then our values and beliefs are why. And I put values and beliefs on the same level, largely because a value doesn't really mean anything without a belief. If I just say, well, my value is health, you would say, well, what does health mean? Then as soon as I start to answer it, I will be giving you beliefs. Similarly, beliefs don't really make any impact unless they're connected to values. If I just say, I believe this is green or something, so what? You're going to be connecting this to values. Now, the key thing about beliefs, of course, is that they support and they reflect things at an identity level, the who. So again, when I say I believe, there is an I that's not the belief, it's on some deeper level. But that, I is holding this belief, but the beliefs often will shape our identity. Because if I say, I am this kind of person, if I say, I am intelligent, I am, an NLP trainer, whatever, those are identity level statements. And then, of course, there's an even higher level, goes beyond ourself and our identity to a sense of purpose. For, we say this is not about who is an identity, but it's for whom, for what. Now, language can express all of these different levels, and language can intertwine them and kind of link them together. And one of the things is that we'll say, and this is the neurolinguistics of this, is that these levels are also engaging different parts of the nervous system. Likewise, language can engage different parts of the nervous system. Some words only engage very superficial aspects of our nervous system. We don't, they don't affect us very much. It's just words, it's just a bunch of words. Other times, people say those are fighting words. People will fight over words. People will even, we'll see, people will even risk their life over words. So beliefs are very powerful, and they also influence a lot. Our belief about things influences us. I often like to give, examples, when you think about what role belief plays, one of the very obvious examples is what's known as the placebo effect. Somebody takes a drug that actually has no medicine in it. They think it's a drug. It could be a flower pill, or it could be an injection of just a solution that has no drug. But if they believe it, surprisingly high percentage of people can have dramatic physiological changes. They're not just sort of imagining the change is happening. There's even been examples, I've done a lot of studies of placebo and the placebo effect. And there's even a really interesting example of a group of women who were given placebo chemotherapy for breast cancer. And because they believed they were getting this chemotherapy, 1/3 of the women getting the placebo chemotherapy lost all of their hair. Now, there was no reason for them to lose their hair except for this impact of belief. Belief also affects our performance, what we believe we can do and what's possible. Well, one of my favorite examples of that is the example of Roger Bannister, who was the first person to run a mile in less than the 5-minute mile, less than 5 minutes. For many years before that, all the best runners, the best athletes were trying to break this barrier, and it was considered an impossible barrier to break. And every time, of course, that people didn't do it, they would say, see, that proves it. It's not possible. Then, and I think it was 1954, Roger Bannister ran a mile faster than 5 minutes. And the interesting thing was, within a couple of months, somebody else did. And within the next couple of years, something like 200 people had done it. So, does that mean that suddenly humans, evolved further, or just that it was our belief that had been holding us? Belief also affects our ability to learn. It affects our sense of our intelligence. There's been an example of this that's been repeated multiple times, where you take a group of students that have average IQ, you put one half give one half to a teacher and tell them these students are extremely intelligent. You give the other half to a group and say, oh, they're really slow. And you don't even tell the students anything. You only tell the teachers. And the interesting thing about this research is when you come back a year later and you assess the IQs of these students that were all average, all 100, the ones that were given to the teacher that was told that they were intelligent, their scores have actually gone up, and IQ is not supposed to change. The other group has gone down. So belief has an extremely big impact in our lives. And, and it can have positive impact or negative impact. It's a double-edged sword. Beliefs are responsible for all of the greatest achievements of human beings. We have to believe that you can create a flying machine before you create one. You have to believe that you can get well in order to get well. You have to believe that you can make the technologies that we're using right now that did not exist even 25 years ago. You have to believe that this is possible and that it's important and that it's worth it and that you can do it. So now, one of the biggest challenges and one of the other reasons for the development of sleight of mouth is because there's things like limiting beliefs. There are beliefs that hold us back. There's beliefs that keep us, keep us small. There's beliefs that keep us, make us unhealthy. And there's what I call thought viruses. And a thought virus is a special kind of limiting belief because it's actually a belief that I didn't come up with myself. There's a lot of beliefs that we build based on our own experience. We have an experience, we try something, it's something that we're cognitively, consciously working out. But frankly, many of our beliefs, probably more of those than the ones we cognitively, consciously have tried to decide. These beliefs are something that we picked up probably even long before we had an adult conscious mind. As children, we're constantly picking up beliefs, and we pick up beliefs that are not just because of we've thought about it. We grow up in a family system, in a cultural system. In today, you've got all kinds of influences, and so these are beliefs that we build not on our own experience, but on other people's beliefs. And very often, again, they're unconscious. We're not thinking about them. They're coming in. Our focus is somewhere else, but they're kind of coming in the background. So many of these thought viruses are unconscious. So I call them a virus because, if you think about this recent pandemic we've been through, you catch COVID from somebody else. But when you catch it, it affects you, and you even reproduce it. That's why you can infect other people. So it's a bit like this thought virus, or a computer virus can do the same thing. So one of the things that we need, and it's one of the reasons, especially I've focused on this a lot in the Sleight of Mouth Volume 2, is what could be a kind of a virus detection system where we could actually, as we listen to all of the things that are coming in, and especially in today's world, we know, again, in this world of political conflict, economic conflict, climate issues, health issues, that we're bombarded with all kinds of beliefs. And how do we know which ones are worth having? Now, one of the big challenges is oftentimes, and I think this is an important point here, you have a belief, and you need to have a belief when you do not know what is real. And much of our lives, we have to make decisions where we don't really know what's real. We haven't been there. We don't have all the data. We have incomplete information. That information can be distorted. So in many ways, the belief's intention is not to be real. There's sometimes people say, well, when I see it, I'll believe it. I say, well, then it's too late. You don't need to believe it anymore. Because believing it means, I've worked so often with beliefs. I work a lot with beliefs in the areas, for example, of things like businesses, on startups and entrepreneurs, but also in areas like health. And I tell you, people have to believe that it's possible to be healthy at the time when they're the least healthy. I mean, otherwise you give up. Same thing with entrepreneurs. You need to believe that you can succeed at the time when it seems like reality is the most opposite. So that belief is not supposed to simply mirror reality. The purpose of belief is to change reality. And that's why I say, these are words that change worlds. So one of the things that keeps these thought viruses going are what are called confirmation bias, meaning that you have a belief, and rather than go and check and go through a very thorough checking, we actually have these biases that just keep them going. One is called attention bias. That is that we just focus attention only on the things that confirm what we already believe, and we ignore anything that discounts it. You see this all the time. You see this again. You'll see it in trials. You'll see it in, of course, political arguments. We've all done it. We've all experienced the frustration when it happens, when somebody's doing it to you. Another one is called interpretation bias, biased interpretation. That, all right, we both have the same information, but we interpret it differently. I interpret it according to my belief. You interpret it according to your belief. You can see this, and I've seen this where you have some kind of a fact. You go, look, here's a fact, and the person actually just interprets it a different way. So this is one of the big challenges of how do we begin to get positive change if somebody's really stuck or really limited. Another one of these biases is memory bias, that we selectively only remember the information that supports our views. It's easy to forget, and you'll see this, you hear this, of course, in a lot of these high profile trials, well, I can't recall, I don't remember. So it's easy to forget the stuff that doesn't support what we want and what we want to believe, especially when it has strong emotional connotations. These are the reality that we live in. We're not saying that it can't say that it's good or bad or right or wrong. It is what happens. And it's part of what we have to be able to deal with in our own personal experience as well as with others. So what do we do? And what makes a limiting belief? Where some of these limiting beliefs come from? So another source of what we would call these kind of thought viruses, limiting beliefs, come from what Francis Bacon, who was this is now 100 years ago, Francis Bacon was sort of a contemporary of Shakespeare, so back in the 1600s. And he was kind of considered one of the pioneers of modern science. But he talked about what he called these 4 idols of the mind. Our minds have idol. Now, an idol means it's kind of something that you worship. But oftentimes, we talk about a false idol. This idol is representing something. And he said kind of our first basic idol is what he calls the idol of the tribe, that we as humans are a tribe, and that we tend to think that our perception of the world is accurately mirrors it. I mean, even right now, like we say, okay, what I see in front of me, it's accurately mirroring reality. And yet there are so many illusions that can be created. We know this today, that even, for example, We can you can do deep fake, you can create, and there was all the Photoshop things. There are many things that are not an accurate mirror of reality, even what we think we perceive, because we have our sensory filters. So this notion that we think that our map is the territory, and there's often a lot of, let's say there can be more and less of a big gap there. A second one of these idols he calls the idol of the cave or the den, which means, so we grow up in our own family system, we grow up in our cultural system, and we have our education. And so we have our own, so again, this is like our personal biases. And we think that our judgments and our personal experience is the best, or it's objectively true. So we don't, especially if we haven't spent time in different cultures and everything, we have these cultural biases. We live in these kind of bubbles where you have these so-called filtered algorithms that just give us information that we are interested in, and nothing that we don't want to know. A third he calls the idols of the marketplace. And so right now we're kind of in a marketplace. We're interacting. I'm using language. I'm using words, obviously. And if we just think, oh, we all share exactly the same understanding of these words, that's going to be tricky, because we each have, any word, we just have our own personal associations to. That's how we give it meaning. But we'll think that, oh, if they're using that same word, they mean the same thing that I do. A final one is what he called the idols of the theater, which would be, of course, out of words, we build political systems, religions, philosophies, even, scientific understandings. But these, again, he says, well, these are being built off of these other idols, so, these are the ways that we need to, again, we build our realities here. But if we idolize it and don't examine it, that's where things really get tricky, both in our own personal lives. So Sleight of Mouth has a very personal impact, but also in our social lives and in our social realities. So Sleight of Mouth can be used to change our own world. It can also be used to change the bigger world. And why is this important? Is kind of just to sort of summarize some of the things that I've said. More than any other time in history, we're bombarded with potential thought viruses. Myself, even in the last few years, I get, from WhatsApp, from, a message, from, emails, from all kinds of social media, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, etc. You're getting, bombarded, Facebook. So, we have social media, and we know that gets flooded with, so-called fake news, alternative facts, this idea of the algorithmic editing, where I am so aware of this. I click on some news item and then I just get a bunch more of that same thing, and I get tired of it. Of course, we know we live in a world where there's a lot of conspiracy theories. We have this development of the so-called metaverse, which means it's a universe that is, you have cryptocurrency. It's not that it's money that's not based against, gold or silver. It's just only created. It's all created. You can buy, cyber land that doesn't exist anywhere except in this, non-physical universe. And of course, as we know, we're dealing a lot with now big advances in artificial intelligence and virtual reality. So we are living more and more in a world where you're not going to be able to reach out and go and touch it and say, when I see it, I'll believe it. You won't have that opportunity, or even what you see is not going to be what's really there. You see the little picture, for example, on this slide. It shows one person is chasing another person with a knife. Now, and then you see, if you look closely at the camera, the camera is only focused on a part of this interaction. And it actually, if you can see inside, you'll see that picture reverses the reality. That it looks like the person's foot who's running is a knife, and then the other that person is attacking the other. And this just shows that you can distort things. You can just take part of something. Yeah. again, people could be looking at this exact same thing and still seeing a completely different reality and portraying a different reality. So this is why this understanding more deeply how this happens and how we create these worlds with our words is so significant. Now, what do we do? So how is sleight of mouth used in NLP and when it's used effectively? Well, we want to be able to identify limiting beliefs and thought viruses. We want to be able to enrich our maps, to not just keep stuck in the bubble and just keep in these confirmation biases. We want to be able to create flexibility, have new and different legitimate perspectives, or expand an existing perspective, or see an old perspective from a new point of view. These are all the things that sleight of mouth is designed to do through words. And of course, I'll be giving you some examples in just a moment. So one thing we often do is you'll notice that I can talk about the same situation. I can be talking about it either as a problem, so I can say, oh, well, this, they're struggling here. For example, you could take, any one of our current situations. We could talk about climate change, and we can talk about what's the problem to be avoided. Why is it a problem? Who's caused it? Whose fault is it? But what you can also do is switch to what we call an outcome frame. Well, so what do we want? How can we get that? What resources are available? If you stay stuck in a problem frame, everything is a problem. I mean, you can create a lot of problems, and the world is full of problems. If you switch to the outcome frame, then and again, you could be talking about the exact same situation. I'll be giving you some examples. But this is just one example of the kind of things that we would do and we learn to do when using sleight of mouth. What these books are about. Limiting beliefs, as it says, are often stated in a problem frame. Now, here's where we start to go. I'm just going to give you a little bit of insight into then, well, what is sleight of mouth? How does it work? First thing is, we say that beliefs, the language of beliefs has a structure. It's neuro-linguistic. That means that, so not every word that you say is a belief. Not every sentence that you say is a belief. A belief typically has a particular structure. And that structure is usually some kind of a cause and effect or some kind of equivalence. That means something is creating something or causing something, or something is causing something else, or something means something. Well, this means that. And I'm giving here some examples of kind of common limiting beliefs. I run into these. These are actually, some of these are from some of the sleight of mouth programs I've done, or programs where we've explored sleight of mouth. If I speak, people are going to laugh at me. That's a cause and effect. If I speak, people will laugh at me. Or no matter what I do, I'll never get enough. Now, you'll notice these are also big generalizations. And this is the other thing that beliefs do in our lives, is they create these generalizations. And we have to live based on generalizations. We make judgments based on generalizations. We guide our lives based on generalizations. And so now notice, of course, these are put in a problem frame. That some people are going to laugh at me. I'm never going to have enough. One of the things we see that we'll be doing with something like sleight of mouth is turn that into an outcome frame. Oh, well, so what do you want? What would be the outcome? Would you want to be confident? Do you want to be skillful with language? What is it that you want? Same thing. Well, I will never get enough. Well, so obviously you would be nice to have enough. Let's explore what it would mean to have enough. What are some things that you could do? You said, no matter what I do, have you done every single thing? So, these are where we start to kind of use, once we can understand a structure, we can begin to make we say kind of operate on that. And that's what these sleight of mouth patterns are. They're all different kinds of operations. Sometimes the cause effect is reversed. I'm not capable because I failed in the past. What I want is important because other people's needs take precedence. Again, these are common things that you'll hear, maybe some that you even say yourself or have said yourself. Now, again, this is the linguistic part. And what happens, of course, is that when these words resonate with something, then it's not just words anymore. You start to feel it. People can become very emotionally attached, as we know, to different kinds of beliefs. And that's where also the confirmation bias will begin to, come in. So what do we do with these? What is sleight of mouth about? So here we've identified this belief. And remember, you have to make sure that you get that structure, because that's going to be important. So what do we do? And as I said, these sleight of mouth patterns they're operations on these limiting beliefs. And we're not going to go all 14 here. I want to give some examples, though, so you get the sense of how it works and the kind of thing that we explore in the workshop. Because in the workshop, we go through these patterns. We take limiting beliefs of our own or others that we want to, bring more, enrichment to. And we're practicing developing this as a skill so that we can use language like some of the people who have really made, a big difference in the world and big difference in other people's lives. Milton Erickson, who I mentioned before, was one of them and was a big inspiration for me. And as I said, he was able to be successful in so many different areas. And we just was going to give just a few examples of things that's why I was wanting to understand, well, what's going on here and how do we make a map of this? So one of the sleight of mouth patterns is called redefine. And I'll just give you an example of how Erickson would, again, use language this way. There was a young woman he was working with who was like probably either in her late teens or early 20s, a college age, young woman. But when she was in her, probably, 12, 13, she was in a car accident and got a cut above her lip, which she thought was, horrible. She had this scar that was, damaged her face. And of course, she associated with this traumatic event. And so she thought this made her look ugly, and she would be constantly hiding it. She would, when she spoke, or she would often, she turned her head away, when she was really obsessed with this thing. And she said it was the scar that made her horribly ugly. Well, Erickson did this interesting thing. He noticed that she liked to draw, and so he gave her an assignment to go research and draw beauty marks. And so, she went and drew a bunch of pictures. Then he also had her draw a picture of her own face. And then they were kind of looking at these pictures, and suddenly she starts to realize, hey, wait, this thing looks a lot like these beauty marks. And so suddenly, instead of an ugly scar, it became a beauty mark. And again, it's just interesting, the way that you talk about something starts to shift the way that you look at it. One of my favorite examples, this is another sleight of mouth pattern that's known as consequence. Erickson, for a time, worked in a hospital that had a lot of, fairly, let's say severe, patients with severe mental disorders. And one person was kind of running around with this delusion that he was Jesus Christ, and so he was wear sheets over him and try to preach to everybody. And one day, Erickson went up to him, and by the way, this is an interesting thing about sleight of mouth. You'll see from all of these Erickson examples, sleight of mouth never tries to directly attack the belief. Like Erickson never said, "Oh, that scar isn't ugly." He never said to this person, "You're not Jesus Christ." He actually, what he said was, he said, "I understand that you have experience as a carpenter." Now, since Jesus was the son, was a carpenter's son, and had, according to the Bible, worked worked in his father's trade for a while. Well, he can't say no. Yes, he said, and I, understand that you, really like to help people. You're here to help the world. Well, yes, and so he said, well, we're having this project over here where they're really having some trouble. They're trying to build these bookshelves. Could you come and give some advice? And so he used that to get this person kind of involved in this project. And eventually this person began to sort of make friends and, make progress. So you see, it's kind of helping to shift. It's giving us other perspective. Another one, we call it chunking down, which means because we said beliefs are a lot about generalizations. And because Erickson worked with hypnotherapy, he had this one person who claimed, that, I am unhypnotizable. All, these people have tried to hypnotize me and it's never happened. I am unhypnotizable. And Erickson said to him, well, yes, you're absolutely right. You are unhypnotizable. all of these are unhypnotizable except your arm. And the guy says, what? And he sort of lifts the person's arm and looks at him meaningfully. And, of course, one of the things we realize is the person is interested in hypnosis, but he's probably also very guarded. So by chunking down and saying, well, I'm not putting you into a trance, just your arm, then a whole different, mindset gets activated. And then this person, by the way, his arm, when Erickson let it go, it sort of stayed there. And then this person went on to have very interesting and helpful hypnotic experiences. Another interesting example, there was a young lady, probably again, sort of just starting in her teenage years, where she was beginning to grow, and her feet were growing faster than the rest of her body. And she just became obsessed with the fact that she had these big feet and that they were so unattractive. And she started, not going out. She just wanted to stay inside all the time. And so Erickson sort of worked out with her mother to do a house visit, because he was also a doctor. So he came over to the house, and he sort of maneuvered where he's talking to the mother and kind of actually helping the mother with something. And he sees that the girl is standing just sort of right behind him. And he purposefully, on purpose, kind of steps back and steps on her foot. And she goes, ouch. And he says, well, if you would grow those feet big enough that a man could see them, this wouldn't be happening to me. And so, it's like, so he's making what we call a counterexample. She thinks her feet are too big. He's saying they're too small. And he's actually stepping on them going, hey, I can't see your feet. Interesting thing, the mother said after that day, the girl never complained about her feet again. She started going back out with her friends. Another sleight of mouth pattern is what we call analogy, where instead of, analogy is instead of talking about something, I'm using an analogy for it. This example, there was a man who had a lot of really severe pain. He had a very, advanced severe form of cancer, and no drugs were helping him. But Erickson knew that he liked plants, and he was a gardener. And so Erickson started to talk about tomato plants and how comfortable tomato plants could be. And he's talked about sending their roots deep into the earth and how they could draw resources there. And just by talking about this whole thing about tomato plants, he was beginning to shift this person's experience, shift this belief. And again, this person began to relax and had, for the first time, relief from his pain. Another one is we call it another outcome. Another outcome means usually we're so focused on one particular kind of result, all of our attention is going there. One of the principles of sleight of mouth is that energy follows attention, and that language directs attention. And so this was an interesting example of a man who had lost his arm in an accident, a work accident, and had this excruciating phantom limb pain. And again, for phantom limb pain, drugs don't deal with it because it's not physical. And so they thought, well, they're going to send them to Erickson and see if he could, do this hypnosis to take the pain away. Well, and the guy had struggled, and nothing seemed to work. But Erickson, when he first saw him, said, well, I think anybody that has endured as much phantom limb pain as you have deserves at least as much phantom limb pleasure. So let's first look at phantom limb pleasure. So here, by the way, you see that shift, as all of these examples, a shift to an outcome frame from a problem frame. And so they started working on, well, what would phantom limb pleasure be like? How would you create phantom limb pleasure? What would that be like? When did you have pleasure with his limbs? What kind of things gives pleasure? Another one that was another example of sort of sleight of mouth is there was this young boy, mother had gotten divorced, and probably boy was about 8 or 9. And she was starting to see other people, and this boy became really, very willful, and was, saying he didn't have to do anything his mother said, and he started disobeying and causing all kinds of trouble at school and everything. And whenever she tried to discipline him, he'd just say, "I'm a big boy; I can do whatever I want." And so she brought him to Erickson to see if he could help. And of course, Erickson's starting to talk to the boy, and the boy goes, "I don't have to listen to you. I can do whatever I want." And he just stamps his foot on the heart as hard as he can on the floor. And so Erickson says, well, a big boy would be able to stamp his foot harder than that. So the boy, of course, stamps his foot really hard again. And then Erickson says, well, big boy would be able to stamp that at least 50 times. And the big boy starts stamping. So I'm going to stamp a hole in this floor, so he's stamping. And of course, after about 30, he's starting to get a little bit tired. And Erickson's saying, well, a big boy would begin to know when he's get tired. He would, he would be able to sit down if he wanted to. Big boy would be able to help his mother, and not just, disobey his mother. Big boy be able to talk with adults. So now you get this interesting thing that this boy is saying, we call it applying to itself, because I'm actually using the limiting belief to change itself. Well, I can do whatever I want. I'm a big boy. Oh, well, then let's see. And actually, a big boy would want to cooperate. A big boy would know that he can't do everything on his own. Finally, there's one we call hierarchy of criteria. These are just to give you some examples. There's so many. There's another example of a woman who is suffering from a lot of very deep pain from an advanced illness, and no drugs seemed to work. And she came in to see Erickson and was saying, well, Sonny, what do you think you can do to help me? Nothing else has helped. Even the doctor said I could combine the strongest, the strongest painkillers, and it still doesn't help. And Erickson says to her, well, I can see by your face how much pain you're in. I can see by the way your muscles are tense and everything. He said, but I'm curious, how much pain would you feel if you noticed a hungry tiger coming through that door over there right now? And the woman looked over and said, well, I wouldn't feel any pain if I saw a hungry tiger. He said, licking its chops, And he said, oh, and she said, and then she says, oh, in fact, I'm not feeling any pain right now. And so they made the agreement that she could take the hungry tiger with her, this imaginary hungry tiger, home and keep it under her bed. Now, these are just examples of how, again, you can take language and make, by the use of words, really shift realities. Now, these, of course, are on an individual level. A number of the people that I also studied were doing similar things on a more, cultural level or global level. One of my favorites here is from the Bible, where there's a story about Jesus where they bring a woman who was taken in adultery. It means, she was sleeping with somebody other than her husband, which was considered a horrible thing. And, she wasn't married to this person. And they said, now, Moses, the laws of Moses said she should be stoned, which is a horrible way to die. Obviously, she should be killed, but what did you say? Because, of course, Jesus was supposedly somebody who was preaching peace, who was preaching forgiveness. And they wanted to see what could they get him to sort of say, well, I'm against the laws of Moses, which then, that would be, they could, blame him for that. So he kind of, as they say, interesting, the description, he actually stooped down and is sort of writing on the ground. And they keep asking, well, so what is it? And he stands up and famously says, well, let the one of you who is without sin then cast the first stone, which is a very interesting thing to say. Because again, you notice it doesn't challenge the belief. It doesn't, it's actually taking you to another perspective. And according to the story, that sort of the oldest one that was there kind of went out left first, and then all the rest went. And so, again, this is this notion of applying to self. This was one that actually Jesus, tended to use a lot in the descriptions, where he'd say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Why do you see the speck in that person's eye and not the beam in your own eye? So this kind of looking at your own judgments, applying them to yourself. Gandhi, who we said was a great example of bringing nonviolence. And one of the complaints often was that, well, nonviolence, it's only for people who, lack courage, otherwise you'd fight. And he said, wait a minute, where do you think more courage is required? In blowing somebody else up, from behind a cannon, or approaching it with a smiling face? Who's the true warrior? The one who's killing others, or the one who is actually, having enough courage to, take the punishment. So this is what's called a counterexample. And he says, somebody who has no courage could never be a passive resistor. So But he says, however, I will admit that even somebody who is weak in body is capable of it. And, one person or a million can do it, or both men and women can do it. So now we see that it sort of turning what seems to be a criticism into an advantage. People like Martin Luther King Jr., was in one of his speeches was talking about what's the right thing to do. I think this was also around during the time of the Vietnam War, and he was saying, well, in some positions, cowardice asks, is it safe? Expediency asks, is it politic? Is it advisable? Vanity says, is it popular? So, but conscience asks, is it right? And there comes a time when you've got to take a position that's neither safe nor politic or popular, but you do it because it's right. So now here again, you get this sense of values and what we call this hierarchy of values, hierarchy of criteria. So you're taking the same situation but using a different value, a different criterion, we call it, to perceive it. Lincoln, I mentioned, was used language a lot. He did a lot of anti-slavery speeches, and there was this. I mean, this is one where people would say, "Oh, well, whites are superior, so it's somehow it's okay for them to enslave people of color." And he says, again, this is an interesting thing about sleight of mouth. Instead of arguing and saying, no, this is not that way, he says, well, actually, so let's say that's true. Let's say that they were inferior. Isn't it in the gifts of nature? Isn't it the reverse, that you should take anything from the little which has been given? Especially, this was often done by people who called themselves Christians. How could a Christian have a slave? Well, it's okay. He says, give to the needy is the Christian rule of slavery. Take from the needy is the rule of slavery. Sorry, Christian rule versus the rule of slavery. So this is doing an interesting thing. He redefines inferior to needy, redefines slavery as taking something, and then saying the consequence of that, though, is that if you're truly a good Christian, you would want to be giving to the needy, not taking away. So these, again, are the kinds of things that you see that you're using language in a very, very specific way, in an interesting way. And also, here we're only looking at single examples, but you can also use, and in the books, especially the volume 2, I'm showing how people like Lincoln use sequences of them. We call them strategies, where there's not just sort of one, but you're using multiple ones. Look at things like Shakespeare's famous Mark Antony speech, the Henry V, when he's getting these people who are outnumbered 5-1 to actually go into this battle, and they have a surprising improbable victory. Or Gandhi and his whole work towards nonviolence. So these are just showing that we also put these together in groupings, and that what we call a strategy that is going to lead to a particular kind of an outcome. So this is some examples of the things that we will be going over in much more detail next February. These are the 2 weekends, and there's the place that you can find out more about it. It's the James Bond site, 007, 7007.info. So we're just going to kind of wanted to go over. That's an example of some of the things that, so first of all, a little bit of ground of, well, what is sleight of mouth, why it's important, how can we use it, how has it been used in this program, and when we do it, we will be having people, again, starting with some of our own beliefs. Where do I get stuck in my own belief system? Which of these confirmation biases, which of these idols, is kind of keeping me trapped? How can I find new perspectives that take me to another place? So now what I wanted to do, and we do have a few minutes, I was going to see, there might be some questions. I always love, and during the workshop, obviously, we do, we have extended question and answer periods. That's always my favorite. That's even where we'll do demos. We do demos of this. We give more examples. We do question and answer. So I'm curious, and I know that Oksana and Richard are probably monitoring our chat. And if you do have a question, we'll have the time to at least take maybe a couple. put them in the chat. And if nobody has a question, I'm sure that Oksana or Richard has a good question.
So
and you can hear me
you,
now. You guys can hear me.
We can hear you well.
yeah,
Good.
thank goodness. We do have a question from Zlata.
Yes.
Question for Mr. Dilts. Every time we get online, we automatically get into safe funnels. Is there a basic, quick way to distinguish true experts from pseudo experts beneath their personal brands?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that we do in the program and that I do in the book is we say, okay, what are some of we call it red flags? And to me, and by the way, somebody who's even an expert could still have limiting beliefs. That's part of the problem, even. So the fact that they are an expert does not mean that they are immune to also some kind of limiting belief. So what I do, and we do in the book, is say, okay, what are red flags that let you know, hey, this might not be such a good thing? And for example, those are things I've already mentioned. One, like, is it only talking about a problem and no outcome or solution? Does this tend to just give, we call it negative identity messages and, divisiveness and othering. We call it othering, meaning, those people there, blah, blah, blah. Again, even an expert can fall prey to that. Is it only about is it only words and does not go to any other, we call it other forms of intelligence? If it's just all words and there's no data or there's nothing else to back it up, that's probably another red flag. Another thing we say is this idea of, is it only going away from or is it going towards something? So those would be the things when I'm looking at these myself, those are the things that I'm looking for. And again, even valid experts can have limiting beliefs that I would say, wait a minute, I'm not so sure even that an expert that I want to take that belief. So I hope that helps. Yeah, do we have?
I think it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
I know we just, unfortunately, that's the problem with doing it this way. We can't actually ask. We can't say, hey, but hopefully.
But on the actual workshop, you can ask.
That's right.
We will have possibilities for personal questions to you and also personal work with you in the lottery.
Exactly.
So, time for one more?
Yes.
So one simple question, I think it's a really good one. What are the best ways to practice sleight of mouth in your experience? And another one may be related, Robert.
Yeah.
How accessible are these patterns conversationally once learned? That's from Toby and from I lost.
First of all, they
from Doherty.
From Doherty. So first of all, you can use them conversationally. I'll give you an interesting example. You can use them in a coaching conversation. I was just talking to a colleague of mine we were sharing about this, and he was talking about a coaching situation he did with somebody recently who was talking about, in their life that when they were, when this person was about 8, his parents split up, and partially the father had to be escorted away, and he grew up in this place and he couldn't stand this family system. And so when he was saying, when I was 16, I went and I left home and I stayed on a cousin's bed and stuff. And my friend just simply conversationally said, "Oh, wow, so you didn't end up on the street." Now that's a simple little thing, but you realize, I guess I didn't end up on the street. That was started something that was actually I was able to start to take care of my own life. So instead of it being the story of a problem, it then starts to become the story of how I was able to build my own life. So yes, the interesting thing is even just a little bit of a comment like that can really sort of shift perspective, kind of thinking, I have a hard life story to, wow, actually this has been fascinating. One of the people I profile in the volume 2 is Oprah Winfrey, who, as you may know, she's started life as a illegitimate child, to an unwed mother in poverty. So she was, African-American woman in poverty, This is not the profile of who you would expect to become the first woman, especially woman of color billionaire. So what did she do? And a lot of what she does is it's her way of looking at her life and her experiences. And she says, if you talk about something as a struggle, it's a struggle. That I started talking about my path as an honor. Then it's an honor. It has challenges, but it's an honor. So just those kind of things can make a huge difference. And about how to practice. Practicing is, I do things like, you want to get good Sleight of Mouth practice. Look at some of the. When I look at my news feed, the politician statements. I start looking at, and what I've done is look at also literature. What are things where people have actually made a difference in the world? I spend a lot of time, for example, looking at things like Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. Oh, well, that made a big difference. You can also, another important thing of practicing is realizing that, sleight of mouth, as I said, is a double-edged sword. People like Hitler use sleight of mouth as well, and you use certain words, to talk about people. And if you hear these, like I said, these negative identity judgments, you talk about people as a scourge, then you start going, I'm recognizing as I'm reading these things or as I'm hearing these things that these things patterns are starting to pop out. And usually what you're going to find is that people, especially well-known people, who we hear a lot, they'll use certain patterns a lot and of course have blind spots to others. And then it's really interesting just to start looking and listening. And the way that I practice, and maybe this is the key here to the answer, is I always have a question. So I don't just kind of look at something and go, I wonder what's, is this sleight of mouth? I go, okay, what's my question here? What question do I have about this? Maybe is there a blind spot here? Is there something that's being repeated here? Is there a red flag? How many red flags are here? So that's often the way that I'm practicing, because I want to use it in a very pragmatic way. I'm not just doing it because, it's, a sleight of mouth is fun or it's interesting. It is, but it's very relevant to our lives. Another thing that I do, if you really want to practice, is listen to yourself. Listen to when you kind of are defensive or you feel bad or something. What are you saying? So I kind of have I try to get my own little inner virus detection, observer going on. So I think everything that I do with NLP or any of the things I've developed, I always practice with me first, because that's where first of all, that's where it's going to make the best difference. And then secondly, that's also where I really get to know the value and the impact of it. So, I know because of the sound, we got off to a little bit later start. So maybe we could even just go a little later, do one more. I know that.
We can continue.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, thank you very much.
For your kindness.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few questions about the new volume.
Yes.
Sleight of Mouth 2.
Yes.
When is it coming out? And also, what's the main difference between the first volume and the second volume?
Those are great questions. First of all, so I think I was sharing with you both. I'm actually done with the body of it. It's all, the main part is all laid out. There's just a few, details that need to be done. So I'm thinking that probably, it's going to be ready to go to publication by the end of this month, and certainly would be out by the end of the year. So it will be out before the program in February. What's the difference between that and volume 1? So one of the things I'm doing with volume 2 is I do review all of the patterns, and I review them with a special, I have examples, historical examples of each one. I have an Erickson example for each one, how he used this in a personal change setting. I have a joke, at least, or a humorous anecdote for each one, because sleight of mouth is also the basis for a lot of humor. So, and there's a question, because one of the things I point out is that ultimately, sleight of mouth itself, yes, it's words, but how do you find the words? Well, you find the words because you're using a particular mindset. And I said, you're asking a question. So there's also a question that sort of focuses the mindset for each one. Then probably one of the big differences is that I'm also showing how you use them in combinations in order to achieve certain kinds of outcomes. For example, so we have examples, and in the example section, you have, for instance, we've heard about the Socratic method. Well, what is the Socratic method? Well, we know it's about questions, but how do you know which questions to ask? And so in this, I go over, some of the Plato's dialogues, the Socratic dialogues, and I'm saying, look, here's this pattern of how Socrates is using these particular sleight of mouth patterns over and over and over again as he's, exploring these different issues. As I said, there's also examples of how, kind of I was showing on some of those slides, how Gandhi would use a whole series of them in order to really create and promote his belief system of nonviolence. Similarly, with some of these others, with one of the ones that's one of my favorite parts is sort of Oprah Winfrey talking about her journey and how she is promoting these positive beliefs and also kind of reframing these thought viruses about, well, because of your you can't succeed because of your circumstances. And says, well, wait a minute, is that the case? And so it's very interesting. So kind of looking at these pragmatic aspects of how you use not just one sleight of mouth pattern, but a group of them in order to accomplish a particular result. So.
Thank you very much.
Robert, it's such an interesting presentation tonight. I've just listened with great interest, and there's so many people writing in chat. It's just people are going crazy. You're just thanking you and telling you how useful, how interesting, and of course a lot of questions are accumulating. But I think we're going to have to draw to a close here because Donna has just excellent.
Yeah, about the actual workshop which is coming up in next February.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple of announcements. First of all, next 48 hours you will be able to register for the lowest price
for the full workshop.
Yeah,
4 days.
For now, it's the lowest price. So you
$545 now, and it'll be going up to $595 in 48 hours.
So, but even if you watch this webinar later, you can go to the website, which is on the frame of webinar. It's 7007. And you can take a look. You always can join us. The registration is going to be open even after 48 hours finished. The price is including also, of course, online participation live in the workshop with Robert and in big Zoom, all of us, all our big inspired group. And
it'll be a big Zoom. Huh?
Yeah, people already joining. Also, you will able to sign up to the lottery for the demonstration with Robert for personal coaching work.
And 3 months free access to the videos afterwards, with the possibility of renewing it for a modest fee.
Yes, and also the price is including slides in PDF format and also worksheets.
Right?
The worksheets.
And PDF manual, I think, as well too.
Yeah, manual. So it's really interesting material. I already saw them, and
it's fantastic.
It's fantastic.
So interesting.
And also, we have a little surprise for you. If you subscribe for this webinar, if you registered, then you will have
when you register.
When you register, you will get an email from us with also gift from Robert. It's audio recording of the audio guide for Coach State for Wholeness.
For wholeness, that's really a good one. That's really great.
Yeah.
And several months ago, we prepared a special interview with Robert for you. It's Sleight of Mouth 43 years.
43-year anniversary. Yeah, it's
And we are going to publish it very soon, just in a couple of days on this very channel. And also we will send you the link on your email, an interview. If you registered on this webinar, you will get also email. So please join us.
Join us on our Telegram, official Robert Dilts Sleight of Mouth Telegram channel.
All links are right down on the description. Just open the description, and then you can.
Under YouTube here.
Yeah.
So open up the information. Everything's there for you.
And it's going to be a very exciting program, and it's an international one. You can see us; we are an international family, judging by my own English version.
The international English.
International English.
And Oksana, I think that's an important thing. You don't have to be a native speaker to appreciate it and to use it. That's why I say it's really about a mindset. And so, yeah, as long as you are able to use language, you will benefit from this. So, yeah.
We are very, very excited about this whole Sleight of Mouth series of events. And,
we're hoping that, just hoping, Robert, that you would agree sometime in the future, after we do the first workshop, to do another workshop about the second Sleight of Mouth.
Yes, we do the advanced workshop. And as you know, we've even talked about the Sleight of Mouth Workshop 3. So,
exactly.
It's
going to be.
One of the things that is happening, I just would say too, is, there's another thing that Volume 2 does, is Volume 2 also shows how when you use Sleight of Mouth patterns with Strategies of Genius, which is another series, that's where you get this amazing combination. And so we go over to that in this advanced program, and then we have a whole plan for our number 3, because it's really a developing right now. It's so key to our world today, and it's really kind of synthesizing a lot by bringing together a number of different things. I think it's something that is going to really keep blossoming, keep growing, and so it's a movement.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's great. Thank you. People are asking so many questions. I just wanted to write here in the chat on YouTube that all the information is in the HTTP or www.7007 info. All the questions are answered there, guys.
Yeah. And it's a very well. I want to say it's a very well done website. I was looking at this, going, "Wow!" Even if this wasn't my program, I would be wanting to come to this. It is, and it's true. I think what you provide there really does give a really good description of what's happening, and also all the details.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much.
That was so interesting this evening. What a great taste of what's waiting for us.
That's awesome.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I
hope to see something that we didn't. I don't get to see directly here. We'll get to see you in February if you come on the Zoom, because we'll all be seeing each other on the Zoom. And so let's make February a celebration together.
Yeah, mark it down in your calendar, guys.
And we will have also, after actual workshop, after Robert classes, we also will have every day a networking session for people to get acquainted, to connect all around the world. All specialists, all people who've been interested in personal growth too, because this workshop, it's not only for coaches, psychotherapists, and other people for helping professions. It's also for people from business, for personal growth. So we will have audience from all different spheres of human actions.
Great. We're so much looking forward to it.
Yes.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody, or good day. Have a good rest of the day wherever you are. And thank you, Oksana and Richard. And also the team.
Thank you, Robert.